Computer. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being able to hop on. And if you're viewing this recording, I super appreciate it because I know that you all have very busy lives and a lot to do before the holiday season. But I want to introduce to you to my new friend. His name here is Myles Drake. He's from Canada. And I had this amazing experience with him at this, incredible event that we went to. And I know that a couple of our other coaches on our team had gotten to share this experience. But I wanted to share our friendship with him, between us, with all of you, because this week we've been discussing influence and how we can better influence others to help them live positive, happy, healthy, fulfilling lives. And, if you have been going through reading the High Performance Habits book, you've learned how important it is to gain social support. And so, since then, Myles and I have just been kind of tag teaming back and forth saying, hey, how are you? And, what are you doing this week? And there's just some things that have wowed me about him that I think it's going to be really important for you guys to hear and learn what his mission is, just so that as you go forward with your conversations with people, you can see how our relationship has started to form. So I'm introducing to you Myles, and I am going to ask him first to share with all of us, because he can do a much better job than I about sharing a little bit about himself and just who he is. So Myles, if you wouldn't mind sharing just a little bit about yourself and, maybe even how we met, your version of how we met.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, thank you for, taking this time to talk with me. This is super fun. Always really cool to connect with you. So a little bit about me. So my name is Myles Drake. I live in Ontario, small town called Grimsby. And one of the stories that defines my life is that when I was growing up, I wanted to be a professional motocross racer. And so I kind of pursued that goal, that dream of mine since the age of 10. And then, through a series of injuries, I kind of shifted gears and I wanted to get on a professional race team. And so I ended up doing that. And I started working for a race car team called Super when I was about 23. And for a lot of my life, I was kind of very, very goal driven and kind of thinking like, what is next? What is next? What is next? And then I find myself at 24 and I'm on this professional race car team. And then I'm asking myself, like, what is next now? I've been goal driven for so long, and I get to that place and I didn't really know what was next. And, I where I was kind of living the dream, but I was also kind of wondering, like, where's the impact on people's lives that I'm having? At that point it was, race cars were really cool. But, I'd done work before working with kids and really loved doing that and kind of saw the potential in that. And so I worked on that team for a year and a half, and then I found an opportunity to go on a high school tour, traveling around Canada doing speeches, motivational presentations to students. And so myself, two other speakers, and a band, we hopped on a school bus and traveled around Canada and shared our stories of highs and lows, essentially, with 25,000 students over the course of a 4-month period. And after that, I got to do a TED Talk talking about the experience, and it was really cool. It was the tour was on empathy, and the theme was called Fixing the Focus, Choosing Empathy First, with a nonprofit called Live Different. And it was a really cool experience because for me, I didn't really have a firm grasp on what empathy was prior to that tour, but after going through it and just kind of putting out the notion that empathy is when we're able to share how we're feeling, whether it's the highs and lows of our lives. And when we put it out there, that's when people kind of open themselves up to us. So when I was on this tour, I was speaking to kids anywhere between the age of 10 to 17, and so I got to talk about the highlight reel of my life, searching or chasing this dream, chasing this, being on a race team one day. But I also got to talk about some of the other things that I went through, like being a young kid at age 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, going to a different school every year, and kind of the insecurities that came up with that. So grade 6, 7, 8, and 9, went to a different school, and it started off really good, going to all these different schools, meeting new friend groups, kind of embracing the change and these new peer groups. But then it got a little bit harder, and then I kind of started facing some of the things that teenagers go through, like having acne on my face and a voice that cracked all the time. And so one of the messages that I talked about was how, like, our words can have such an impact on people's lives. So me being in the 9th grade, I can remember not having a lot of friends, walking around through the school and kind of being insecure about myself, and kind of ask myself, why do I feel this way? And when I would look in the mirror, I would see a person who, I thought of myself ugly kid. And I remember one kid's comment just saying, "Why don't you wash your face?" And that just kind of confirmed the belief in all of the that I thought everybody was thinking about me. And so kind of trailing down this self-deprecating hole. And remember one day going into the bathroom of my house and about to turn on the light, and I didn't turn on the light. I didn't want to look at the person in the mirror. That kind of being like one of the lower points, right? In the 10th grade, it's funny how, we think that everybody is thinking about it and all of our shortcomings, but reality, everybody's thinking about themselves, and they're trying to deal with their own lives. And so getting to share that story with all these students, and then kind of opening up the floor to them afterwards and saying, if there's anything that you're going through or you've gone through that you haven't been able to open up to anybody about, if you feel comfortable, you can share with us, you can share with your teachers. And so we'd have these students come up to us and share with us, like, anything and everything. It was really eye-opening, because you would see people, they'd come up and they'd talk to us about a parent who had passed, or having, grown up in, like, just a lot of trauma, but also a lot of other things that, I didn't experience really any trauma growing up. And, a lot of times a motivational speaker is somebody that's come from, like, insane odds. They've come up through orphanages, and they've come up through all of these, like, horrific beginnings. And so that was one of my biggest insecurities, was that I come from great odds. I grew up in a white, middle class, good parents. I had a pretty good life, and so I didn't feel like I was coming from deep struggle, and how would I be able to connect with an audience? But I think that everybody has such a profound story, as long as they're able to convey it in a way, right? We all go through our own emotional spectrum. So a very long-winded answer of a little bit about me, but that was one of my...
It's great. It's great, because
my life-defining experience going on that tour.
Yeah, and it leads me to a question about influence, again, because you told me it wasn't that easy at first. You told me that, the first couple of presentations that you guys had done, kids weren't necessarily opening up right away, and you guys all started wondering. And it kind of goes along with this first high performing habit of knowing our audience, and then being able to teach them how to actually think. And it's one thing to be told, right? They say, a selling technique, you can tell somebody something, but when you can tell a story, that's where you truly become relatable and sell them on an idea, right? So you told me of something, though, that you needed to break through. You needed to break through to gain these kids' trust, because, again, the reality is you're an adult up on stage, right?
Right, yeah.
You have gone through that already. So if you can remember what you told me you did to gain that trust with them, what did you do? What did you do to get them to open up? And this I find absolutely fascinating.
So are you talking about, like, the handstands? Is that?
Yep.
Yeah. So that was a really funny kind of test. So at the beginning of when I first started on the tour, I would just walk to a microphone and be like, "Hey, what's going on, everybody?" But then I started when I was 17. I did a lot of handstands just on my front lawn. I was one of those kids that kind of isolated himself a lot, and so I picked up really weird skills like juggling and being able to walk around on my hands. And so I was really reluctant to do that at first, walk on stage on my hands, because I kind of thought that it was a demonstration of like arrogance. I thought, people might be like, oh, look at this guy showing off, trying to win our attention. But it was really funny because when I started doing that, I would have like 10 times the amount of kids come up to me after and be like, how did you do it? It was funny because it was that initial, like, now you have my attention. And it was just like this initial spark of that caused them to listen to whatever I had to say. And it was funny because a lot of times they would say like, oh, I've never seen anybody do that before. And even though obviously that kind of stuff is available on YouTube, but it's different when it's right there live in person, right? So literally just like do a handstand walk from the one side of the stage to the middle, and then kids would freak out. And I kept doing it because it caused the engagement to skyrocket. And so yeah, I was definitely hesitant to do that at first, but it just worked. And now I do that all the time.
It's great because I love that you demonstrated the fact that you thought it was going to demonstrate a level of arrogance or a level and actually disengage, like, who does this person think that they are, that they can do this? I can't do that, gosh, but it did the exact opposite. And I think you broke a boundary there. Like, you gave yourself that permission to it's something that you were comfortable with, but it wasn't something you were comfortable with necessarily showing off to a whole group of people, but you did it anyway. And so I think that gives a big message to when you're trying to gain influence, of an audience with a message. You have to grab their attention some way. And it might feel weird, but you have to trust your heart and your gut as to, you know what your message is going to be later. And at the end of the day, they were coming up to you, right? They were coming up to you, like, you all their tricks.
Yeah.
I think that's so important.
I think it's kind of funny, sometimes we can be reluctant to share some of the harder times that we've been through with people, and sometimes we don't share some of the highest highlights of our lives as well, because we don't want people to be jealous, or we don't want people to be like, wow, I wish my life was like that, but it's not. But I think that what ends up happening is people like see you as a piece of inspiration, and they don't look at your life like, oh, like, I wish I could do that. That must be nice. It's more like, that's cool. Like, I see that you're doing that, and that because you're doing it, I see that it's possible, and I see that people like myself or others can do the same thing if we want to, because it's like the embodiment, right? And so it's funny how just like the smallest tweak of how we frame things can have such a big difference, right, on the way that we influence the people around.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like that capture, and I think our internet might be a little unstable, so I apologize. But it's like you capture their attention, and then you take it back a bit, and you just be real, and you just relate to them, and again, you tell that story of of how there's hardships, and then you have to create something like a vision. And so, like, that second thing is that teaching people and challenging them to grow, right? That's the second step of influence, is just challenging. So your message, you did that on stage, and then you come and you share your experience, and you gain their trust. How do you challenge others to grow? What do you instill in them? How do you do that? But how do you challenge yourself to, we saw a way you challenged yourself to grow, but how do you relate that to others as well?
So I think the way that, I was able to present and challenging to grow, one of the big takeaways of my message was, like in our lives, we can be really goal driven and kind of reaching and seeking this vision. But, at the end of the day, what happens when we get there and then we don't really know what's next, and if we kind of, I'll be happy when syndrome, like I'll be happy when I get here, I'll be happy when I get here, when I finally get there, then I'll be happy. And, sometimes like we have a huge goal or vision of ourselves. For some people, it's like in business, finally becoming profitable or having the mortgage finally paid off, or, I'll be happy when we finally have the wedding. Right now, it's just so much work. And then you get there and then it's like, okay, now what? And so that was kind of my message, is like, once the goal is reached, if we're kind of, one of my favorite books is called The Happiness Advantage, a guy named Sean Aker, and he talks about how we put happiness ahead of the cognitive horizon. And it's like, once we get to that place, if we're continuously striving for a goal to allow ourselves to be happy, at one point we're going to be disappointed. And so the real answer to happiness is connection between us, right? Like, so in the TED talk that I gave, I talked about the Harvard Men's Study, which was a study done in the 1930s with all these college students that were age 20. They got into college in the 1930s, and their lives are studied for the next 70 years. And so all aspects of their life, from their finances, from their fitness levels, from how much time they spend in the sun, like where they were living geographically, they studied all aspects of their life, and they were studying what causes human flourishing, what causes like essentially be happy or to be actualized. And what they found at the very end, after $20 million spent on the study, 80 years in the making, the guy, George Valiant, he says, we can describe the whole thing in 5 words: happiness is love, full stop, right? And so it's, at the end of the day, like, having all these goals, but it's the depth of our relationships, like how much we're able to connect. And so my message was, that is like what we really need to focus on, is this connection, and how do we get there? If we look at, if you're to describe your best friend or our best family member, how would we describe them? There's a few different ways that we would look at it. So one being that we just have a connection, there's common interests among us. You have a really good friend if you don't see them for like 2 years, and then you meet up again and you're able to just like click and reconnect. That's when there's a strong connection. But then also there's this notion of total acceptance, where you don't have to put on any image at all. You can just, anything that you say that is like a valid expression of ourselves, we're able to be open with each other, right? We're able to share the highs and the lows of our lives, all the things that we're proud of, but also all the things that we know we need to work on, the things that aren't going the best for us. And like true relationships are, an expression of that, like an acceptance of the highs and the lows. And so the challenge that I made with people is to share the lows, because those aren't the ones that are being brought on Facebook, where it's basically like a highlight reel of our lives. People post on Facebook because they want to go back and look at their vacations. They want to look at the pivotal times of their lives. So there's not really an outlet for the other side. Like we have the highlight reel of our lives, and but the real connection comes when we're able to be totally transparent with people, and that comes from that sense of vulnerability. And in my belief and in my experience, and so being able to openly share with people and allowing that high and low acceptance. And so that was kind of the challenge that I had with people. Is like, what, like it's a kind of a hard thing to say, just put yourself out there, but that willingness of trust is also, it's also a really easy filter to understand who actually is important in your life, right? Like if we, so for me, I had self-image issues going up through high school, and if I were to tell somebody like I have self-image issues, and somebody would respond, weirdo, I think that's a pretty good indicator. Maybe I shouldn't be spending a lot of time with this person. But if somebody said like, wow, me too, then I'd be like, okay, well, now we can connect, right? So it's almost like it's a hard thing to do, but it also kind of fast tracks the understanding of how important that relationship is. So yeah, the challenge was I said, share our struggles and allow people to share their own to create that connection. And yeah, and every time, like when I was on stage, having to relive, those kind of darker times was never really an easy thing to do, especially sometimes saying that to a crowd of 1,000, possibly very judgmental high school students. It's not always an easy thing to do, right? But it really, some kids, they are really affected by it, and they're able to, share something in their life that may be holding them down. I think that, we experience these kind of things talking to people my age about some of the stuff that they were like, really? Like, you went through that kind of stuff? Like, I had no idea. And then they'll almost return the favor and tell me a level of depth of their life that I really connect with. And it's, yeah, I think just like, I'm a huge fan of the work of Brene Brown and just her work on vulnerability. And I think that it really does allow for closer connections.
The third behavior is to role model. And you're definitely doing that. You're sharing, your challenges. You're showing your vulnerability. You are, you're putting yourself out there and letting these kids know that they can step out and gain trust of people too. But you're doing something else, and you're making a choice as to who you surround yourself with. And so social support, right? Having people who are cheering you on for what you are doing, right? Because your message is strong. And that you're intentional about being purposeful. But not everybody is going, has that challenge within themselves to grow. I mean, you gave yourself that. And some people aren't willing to accept those challenges. So you're making the choice to step out and go look for that social support. I want to remind everybody on this call that you were not a speaker out of college.
At all, no.
You could tell me exactly what your degree was in, but I know that it was not in public speaking. I know that it was not in counseling. I know that it was not in child psychology. So when you speak about all of these studies that you are reading, you are going out there and you are educating yourself about something that is so very passionate, and then you're submerging yourself in a community that is allowing you the support to speak your mind. And that is huge. That is tremendous. And us as coaches, in the health and fitness world, and it's really not all about body image. It's all about mindset. And you already, said that you were that kid who did not want to look at yourself in the mirror because you knew what you looked like, right? And you knew what others had to say about it. However, you did something to overcome that. And that's the thing. You have to keep looking for that social support to keep going, getting through every single day. So really tell us, because I think this is important for people to know. What did you graduate with a degree in?
Yeah, so I did engineering when I was in school, which is funny because when you think of like a typical engineer, you think of somebody that's almost introverted, with a high level of technical proficiency, where they're able to do something in front of them, and they kind of. I studied automotive engineering at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, and so obviously very different than anything like public school. I love to reference psychology just for the credibility of a lot of these studies. And yeah, it was public speaking was definitely something that I ever grew up doing at all. Like the few times that I did presentations in front of mates, I was super nervous. Like being at the front of the class and legs shaking and like quivering voice, and it was definitely not a natural thing. I think that's really important to know, because I get told that often now. People are like, "Oh, you're a natural," and I'm like, "I'm natural." Like when I first found out about the tour, I was like, I have no public speaking experience at all. Like they are not going to say yes. And so I heard about Toastmasters, and I basically, as soon as I was able to, I found a Toastmasters club. I signed up to it, and I just signed up for speeches, and I went up with cue cards. And even though I was talking about my own life in the very first Toastmaster, you shouldn't need cue cards to know about your own life, but I'm up there with cards, right? Just because I was starting from ground zero. And I just, every single time, I filmed the talk, and then I sent it off to this like nonprofit to say, like, look, I'm trying, right? Like, I know I suck right now, but look at the last video and look at this one. I'm not using notes this time. It's getting better. So yeah, and what you said about the social support and being around people that support you socially, that is like tremendous. And I think that when we met at High Performance Academy, that was one of the biggest takeaways that I had. I know, so early on in the summer, so I love dirt bikes and kind of everything that they're about, but that's a sport that it's prone to injuries. And in June, I fell off the bike, I hurt my shoulder, and a lot of my expression comes from being on a dirt bike. I also instruct yoga. So being injured, and being still wasn't exactly the best thing for me. And so, I kind of, those couple months were a little bit difficult because I wasn't moving around as much. I wasn't doing the things that I really like to do, and feeling a little bit lower. And then I go to High Performance Academy, and I'm just surrounded by these extremely ambitious, motivated people, whose mission is to have an impact on people's lives. And it just like brought me back up to like 100%, and just like super inspired by all the people around me. So that was a huge thing. Is like really having an effort to surround ourselves with the people that inspire us, support us. That's one of the things that I talk to students about now, is that public speaking was something that I didn't think that I was going to do, because first I didn't believe that I could do it myself, right? And the reason for why I'm doing it today was because the people that I was around, they were like, you could do this, you could totally do this. And I was like, really? I don't think so. And they're like, no, you could do this. And so I think that I got, for public speaking, most of my confidence was actually external from the social support of people believing in me more so than I believed in myself, which is huge. It just really goes to show how important you're a result of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I think that statement holds a lot of value.
That is so incredibly true. And that brings up another good point, is that when you're in that element of where you're trying to get your message out there and grow your following and grow in these challenges, is having the social support. It's not always right here at home. I mean, of course, your family always wants to see you succeed. But they don't get what you're trying to do. They're going to be that support, but it's so very important to ask, right? Ask other people, get feedback. You were video recording yourself, right? And sending it on. I mean, you could show your family, and your family's going to do one of two things. They're going to tell you you're great, or they're going to tear you apart, right?
Right.
They're going to be either like incredibly honest, or they're just going to just be like, you're awesome. And so getting that immediate, I don't know, everybody's family is different. So the fact that you were sending that on to say, hey, look, I think I'm getting better each time, give me feedback and be willing to like put yourself out there and say, look, I am getting better, but being, also, look, I'm continuing to work on myself. And you did not go to HPA once, you went twice.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
had two very different experiences though, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So tell me about these two different experiences, because I've only been once. And for me,
Okay.
it was very, I walked through that door and boom, like music, I'm on, we're here.
Yeah.
It was really bizarre. For me, it was like seeing Brendan Bouchard go across the stage and I'm like, oh my God, I'm having an outer body experience, because I can so resonate with every single word. He was as if he was speaking the words that I think every single day in my life, but how do I get them out? And so for me,
Right.
it was my experience. So I just had to like go with it. But tell me about what you experienced the first time, and this is not necessarily to promote it, it's just about stepping out and how we can have two different experiences at the same type of thing. So I'd like to hear about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So first time I went with my dad. Second time I went with my mom. So that was kind of a cool way to break it up like that. And the first time I went, so High Performance Academy, you break into groups frequently and you share things that have like a pretty high level of depth right off the bat, right? And which is kind of funny. So I went in 2015, October 2015, so 2 years ago, and then went with you again at the end of September, beginning of October. And the first time I went, I remember breaking in a group the first time, and they're like, "Okay, guys, we're going to share the three things that we want to, accomplish in the next year." And I was like, I don't want to break into groups and like tell strangers about this kind of stuff. I was like, do we? And like I remember the voice was saying, do we have to do this? Right? Like it was just like, I don't want to do this. Like I was like hoping I might be able to skip it. Because everybody bunches into groups, right? And I was like, maybe I can be, maybe everybody can bunch into groups and I can just be like, the odd man out, but nobody will notice. Like they'll just think I'm a part of another group. But I ended up getting like sucked into a group, and people just start sharing, and they're just like firing away, right? And I was like, wow, okay, like this is so beyond my comfort zone. And just it was so like at first it was just my heart was racing. It was not easy, right? Like, but it was like ridiculously liberating, because it was like I haven't thought of a lot of these things. Like I feel like I've been suppressing my own thoughts, and especially there's such a difference between the thoughts that go on in our head and the difference when we verbalize them, right? Because once we verbalize them, it's like, okay, wow, like that clearly has held enough weight in my mind that it's now coming out. So yeah, like I found that was one of the biggest benefits, was just the sharing. And when I did High Performance Academy in 2015, that's what originally started my speaking career. Because I remember being in this group of 5 people, and they were like, "What is the impact that you want to have on the world?" Right? And I was like looking in the air, and I was like, I don't know. Like I don't know what that impact is. And so I remember this one girl, and she's talking about how she in high school she was bulimic. It was like, now I go around and I tell girls to embrace the bodies that they have, and just like this like deep level of like, wow. I'm just like, okay, wow, this is like an incredible human being. Another one of my friends who I still talk with today, he was talking about how when he was in high school, he got caught by his football coach smoking weed, and he got kicked off the football team, and then he watched his football team lose in the final round, and he knew that if he was on the team, they would have won, because it was like where the play had failed was where he would have been. And so just like to high school kids about, making smart choices, and just like the circle went on and on and on. And I was thinking at that point, I was like, I like engines, I studied automotive engineering. I was like, maybe I'll make them, and then it kind of like dawned on me. I was like, well, like when I was in, grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, I would consider myself having a period of time. I was staying up until 3 o'clock every morning, trying to figure out how to fix like my social anxiety. And I remember, you know, there was like a girl that I liked. I was always like, one day, you know, when I'm okay with myself, those are the kind of thoughts going through my head, right? I'll be able to talk to her. When I'm like comfortable and I don't have to stare at the ground all the time. And I was like, how many kids are probably going through something similar? You know, like maybe there's opportunity there. And so that like Performance Academy caused me to have an entire career shift. I left my job with Subaru not long after, found this tour. And so that was like, you know, like a life-changing experience. And then I went again with and met you at the most recent one. And that was a totally different experience because I kind of knew where I was starting, and I just really allowed myself to think bigger. And I think that when you're in an environment where you don't have to worry about what people are going to say, because they're going to embrace whatever it is that you want to do, and they're going to be like excited about that, and they share in that excitement. It's such a unique atmosphere because it just encourages you to think like so much bigger than what you think is possible, because you get that acceptance, encouragement, and just that empowerment from everybody around you. And then you know that you're going to still be able to exchange emails. You know, I've had weekly, bi-weekly calls with people in different countries for the last 2 years, like since even the first Performance Academy, you know, and just like to maintain that social support. So those type of environments are amazing. They really allow us to kind of see what's possible in our own lives. So.
And keeping those relationships and growing in them, and, you know, and allowing, you know, everybody has their goal or their intention of what they want to do, and right, and how they want to, where they want to grow in their careers, or where they want to help others, but just knowing that there's a community and having that different experience every single time, and keeping those relationships and keep touching base really does. It's like you have this group that, you know, if you ask them to do something for you, they're going to do it because they now know who you are, and they want to see you thrive and succeed. So just like you asked me the first time to do a call with some of your buddies, and I'm asking you now to do this call with a group that we, you know, it's allowing us to share our stories in that way and our missions, so that we know. I mean, and it gets you excited. Like, aren't you fired up right now? I know you get to go try on a tuxedo in about 15 minutes, but you're going to walk into that tuxedo shop feeling like $1 million, right? It doesn't matter how it looks on you. You know, you just got fired up. So again, having that engagement, right? Continuing that engagement, staying involved in the people and those relationships, and keep, you know, building on those. Those are going to be your biggest cheerleaders, whether they're going to come to your events, or whether they're going to participate in your groups, or whether they're going to buy your book that you don't have right now, but you might one day. That's not what matters. What matters is that they were cheering you on, and probably at some point, they probably are going to do all those things, right? They probably will come and support you and see you. Right. They probably will buy your book. It doesn't matter what they're doing right now. If all they're doing is cheering you on right now, that's awesome. But that's influence, right? Is that relationship and that continued permission that you're giving yourself and others are giving you to grow and challenge yourself. And, you know, it is really, truly amazing. And that is actually a huge takeaway from me at HPA, is that every single person that I met had an intention, whatever their goal is and whatever it is that they're growing. And it wasn't necessarily like, I mean, I also was like, wow, I think I can help people here, but these people can help me. Like, there was so much energy in this room.
Yeah.
These are the people I need in my life.
For sure.
Because
Yeah,
2,000
insane.
people jumping up and dancing around and meditating together. It's very powerful, and it's
Yeah,
uncomfortable at first. But
definitely.
as the days go on, at the end of the day, there are relationships that you have. And while I can't say that 4 days is consistent enough, because it is a practice. You have to constantly, like you went to HPA once, you went back again, and now you just did, world's greatest speaker. And I want to hear about your
Yeah,
experience with that as we get ready to close, because I do know that you have to
yeah,
place. But um, constantly re-engaging in your social support in those people who might be struggling with you in whatever they're doing, but then keep on keeping on. So tell me about your experience with this, the greatest world speaker, and then we will be closing here in just a moment, in a little bit.
yeah, yeah. And one thing that I'd really like to kind of bring to light also in relationships is that when I was studying relationships, one of the things that so if you think about a relationship and you're like, how close are you with another person? A lot of times we'll think like, how much can we depend on them? And that is like the indicator of how strong the relationship is. But what people end up saying is actually, how much can they depend on me? You
Mm-hmm.
know, like how much of service to be to other people, and that being like an actual stronger basis of relationships. And so I think that that's like really important, but so like, yeah, like you said, people, reading our books, and people like to do that because they like to know that they were a part of that. They were a part of the inspiration behind that book. They were, like I'm like maybe a third of the way into a book right now, and it's not done, but I've sent it off to friends for them to read, and they like started reading it right away, and they were so keen on seeing, um, like what I was writing about, because they knew that they were kind of involved in some degree in that, because I was close with them, and so some of the things, the ideas that we were sharing, came to life in that book at some point, and so they almost had like a bit of an investment in it as well, and that was kind of cool to see, because setting off a book, I'm like, they're not even going to read it, like what, like there are so many professional authors out there. Why would somebody take the time? But they do, because they know the person, right?
Right.
And so that's kind of a neat thing. And then World's Greatest Speaker Training uh, was an incredible experience. So it was Brennan Burchard again, and I think what was really cool about that was, for one, everybody there wants to be speaking on some level, and so I met some people that were, that had like very, very strong similarities with, and it was just like, wow, we are both going on a very similar path. Like, we should definitely connect and keep each other going. And I think one of the things that I took away from it most was, so World's Greatest Speaker Training is Roger Love, who is one of the top, I think he is the top vocal trainer in the world. So he's taught Madonna, he's taught Maroon 5, he's taught recently Selena Gomez. Whenever somebody from Hollywood goes into an acting role where they need to be able to sing, he is the man that teaches them how to sing in a short period of time. So there's him, and then there's Bo Eason, who is an ex NFL football player turned Broadway actor, and his Broadway play was deemed the play of the decade by the New York Times. So he was, world class in one aspect in football, and then becomes world's greatest, world class in acting. And so just, you look at the guy and you're like, wow, you've done a lot with your life. And what was really cool was he like went into the crowd and he would stare at people in the eyes and say like, you can do anything. You can do anything that you want in your life. And I remember he stared right into my eyes and he said those words, and it just like chilled my soul, right? I was like, and it hit me so hard. I've never had somebody do that in real life, and who had come from those beginnings, right? Like, he talked about how every day at recess when he was a kid, he would run backwards on the field because he knew that that's what a safety in the NFL needed to do in order to be like amazing. And so every single day he would run backwards on the field. And he was like, he was basically, the message he was spreading was anybody can be world class at anything that they want to do, as long as they give them the actual opportunity to do it, and they put in the effort, and they have that sense of belief in them. And belief is a huge part of it. And so just him going around sharing that with people, and you just like, wow. And that sense of empowerment, that was huge. That was a really big thing. And with World Greatest Speaker training, also what was kind of neat about it was that you had about 20 or 30 people do like a small sample of their own talk. They'd go on stage and they'd do like a 3-minute speech, and then they were evaluated. And so you'd kind of see parts of somebody's speech that you identify with, and you're like, okay, that's kind of how I talk. And then you get criticism or critiques from Brendan, from Roger, from Bo about how they can improve. And so one of the biggest things was storytelling. Bo talked about storytelling and how if you want to engage an audience, we don't just say principles. We don't just say like, okay, you need to work hard. He talked about the story of him like in recess running backwards, and just he had this story that embedded the message, right? And it really, so he didn't have to say you need to work hard, because the story encapsulated that. He didn't have to talk about how he was very driven, because the story encapsulated that. And just like how powerful stories are, and our own personal stories are incredibly powerful, right? Like the message that is embedded and the character revealing that is embedded in a story is like profound. And so, yeah, I think that's like the even in business. I'm reading a book right now. It's called The Story Brand, and it's about this guy who he's helped 3,000 different companies build businesses, and it's all from a story. They have like a very simple story, and they're able to connect with their target market just with something that simple. And so that was a huge thing. It just totally made me look at storytelling in a different light.
What's the name of that book?
And I think one of the
brand, you said?
Yeah, it's called The Story Brand. I think it's called The Story Brand. Yeah, really, really good. Yeah, awesome. It's fantastic. I think it's a pretty new release too, so the information is really modern and relevant, and it's top rated on Audible and Amazon, so it's a good one.
I think that's something people struggle with a lot, is telling their story.
Definitely.
We work in the work. We are health and fitness coaches, and it's not always just about fitness and food. It's about the mind. And so stories are just so relatable, but people have a hard time pulling their words together to actually share their story and realize, well, why does anybody want to hear my story? And where do I even begin? I'm just like everybody else. And but the fact that you are just like everybody else, and thinking about that and wanting to make a change or a difference, you're not like everybody else. You're relatable, so share that. And sometimes it's just, again, finding finding your words to share your story without feeling like you're boasting, or because, again, the biggest thing is judgment. People fear judgment of others, and that's the culture of society. But there are those outliers. There is that 10% of people who aren't afraid, or who, it's not that they're afraid, they're not afraid, it's that they're willing to grow, to overcome that, because they have this thing on the inside. And we all have that choice. We either all have that choice to suppress it and just go through the everyday, mundane, day-to-day, and just become a part of society, living day-to-day, and then maybe at the end of their life going, how did I matter? That was kind of like Brendan's message, right?
Yeah.
Matter. Or am I going to step out? Am I going to take this burning thing that I don't know what it is, and I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure it out. And so learning and challenging yourself to grow, and learning about brain health as an engineer, and then getting on stage and doing handstands. So, a yoga engineer and positive motivational speaker. I mean, you're a catch. I mean,
As are you. As are you.
so,
In our last call.
that's just that in itself is an accomplishment, to say that you can do all of those things and enjoy all of those things and share all of those things. So,
Yeah.
well, again, I always like to end with what can I do for you? As you go, come into this holiday season, is there anything that I can do for you to show you some more social support? Do you have anything coming up?
I would love for you to be a guest again on our mastermind. That would be amazing. I know the feedback that I got afterwards from the last call was just tremendous, and just like how cool it was. They're like, man, just like her story is so inspiring, and you obviously love what you're doing, and even anybody that has that kind of enthusiasm, they spread it, right? I think that the world is kind of starving for people that are inspired and willing to pass on that inspiration. So yeah, it'd be awesome to have you again on it.
Thank you. I'd be happy to do that. We could always set up another time. But thank you for taking time on your Saturday morning. I know you have a very busy day. This call is going to be a tremendous inspiration to many people who are on the same mission. We're trying to inspire people to be their best. That's it, right? That's what we happen to just do it through health and fitness. And then, there's a bunch of other people on this team who have even bigger aspirations, just like you, to become public speakers. And this is right now just an avenue to get them there. So you have made a huge difference this morning, and we graciously thank you. And I hope that you have a beautiful holiday.
Thank you very much, Shannon. I really appreciate it.
We'll connect in the new year, and I'll talk to you soon.
Cool. All right, Shannon, take care. Thank you again so much. Nice chatting with you.
Always. Bye-bye.
Always.